For most National Hockey League professionals, it starts this way.
No, I want to be Bobby Orr. I want to be Bobby Orr. I ain't going to be Derek Sanderson. Bobby Orr. I want to be Bobby Orr. I want to be Bobby Orr.
On frozen rural ponds, on backyard rinks, at the local arena, always the vision is of the bright lights in the big league and the Stanley Cup.
Marks with it behind the net to Dallas Smith. Dallas to the right of Cheever starts it out. Now to Bobby Orr. He breaks center ice. Playing with power. Jump to Ken over the line. Ken goes for the shot. Save Ashon in front. Esposito backhander. He scores!
Moore goes to the corner. He digs it out, gives it to Bellabo. He sidesteps the check. Over to Richard, right in front of the net. He shoots, he scores!
Here we go. Bowman skating up, moves in, shoots, he scores!
It's a demanding road to the heights. Just ask Maurice Richard.
So last year when I went to training camp, I was about 15, 20 pounds overweight, and it was kind of hard to play with kids like Henry, my brother, and Dickie Moore that were 15 years and younger than I was, and I was getting scared of getting booed out of their form.
But professional hockey came a long way, too. In the beginning, in 1917, there were 4 NHL teams and a 22-game schedule. In 1920, a record crowd was 8,500. A whole team sold for $5,000. Now, like Ivy, the league has spread to 14 North American cities. Over 500 games attract 7 million fans a season. The average salary is $25,000. Off-ice business revenue has made superstars like Bobby Orr millionaires or close. Hockey writer Elmer Ferguson was the only reporter on hand in Montreal November 22nd, 1917, when the NHL was born. He recalls the flavor of those early years.
I covered that meeting just as I covered hockey since 1902, covered it for my newspaper. The Quebec franchise was transferred to the Toronto arenas, and the Toronto arenas promptly won the league title, and the playoff with Canadians went on to win the Stanley Cup. But I thought the most compelling and remarkable feat of the entire season was the scoring in Joe Malone, who in 20 games of the 22 scored the incredible total of 44 goals, an average of better than 2 goals per game.
Yes, those were the days. Quebec's Joe Malone scores 7 goals in 1 game, still a record today. In Montreal, Muzi Lalonde, playing the rover position, wins the scoring championship. Goaler George Vezina helps Montreal to the title, stopping 78 of 79 shots in 1 game. Toronto's Foster Hewitt did the first play-by-play broadcast of an NHL game in March 1923.
Here we are at Mutual Street Arena for our first broadcast ever on CFCA. I hope you're hearing us, as we had lots of trouble here with the line. Over 8,000 are here to see the Kitchener and Parkdale Canoe Club teams fight it out to decide who will take on the Toronto Granites in the Eastern Canada Final and go west to play for the Allen Cup.
The next year, it was rookie Howie Moranz who did the scoring. In the playoffs alone, he got 7 goals in 6 games to lead Montreal to its first Stanley Cup.
And now he's flying as he comes up on the right side. He moves up to center ice, over the blue line. He shoots, he scores! A beautiful shot by Moranz, who was off balance as he went around Horner on that side.
In 14 regular seasons, the Little Center earned a big reputation with 270 goals. Tragically, a broken leg ended his career at 34. He died 5 weeks later, some people say of a broken heart. By the mid-1920s, the NHL had expanded to 5 U.S. cities. In Boston, Eddie Shore was rolling approving fans into the aisle and keeping rival players in stitches, too.
The puck is in the Boston zone. Eddie Shore moves over from the corner after Clapper had cleared the puck to him. Now Shore starts lumbering up the ice, skating over onto the right wing, up to center ice, moving in close. Clancy moves over to cut him off, but Shore has it, and the puck is right in front of the net. He shoots, he scores! No chance on that one as Shore just bowled his way right through. Ace Bailey has fallen to the ice, and he's lying on the ice now. Bailey injured, apparently, from the attack.
The check almost killed former scoring champ Bailey. He never played in the NHL again.
Shore was in behind our blue line. He was offside, so he had to get out before the play got down there. So, as I am told, on the way out, Shore knocked my feet out from underneath me with his stick. And the result was the head hit the ice first, and she split on both sides. I never had any grudge against him. That could have happened to anybody.
Well, we've just introduced all the stars on the ice at Maple Leaf Gardens. The Gardens is really tense, as this is the moment when Shore is to meet Bailey. Shore is over there on the left. He starts moving over to the microphone. The crowd are beginning to react. There's a tremendous roar from the crowd as the two meet, and Bailey puts his arm around Shore, and everything is fine. The crowd are really enjoying this reunion after a terrible incident that happened in Boston.
But the early years produced some great goaltenders, too. One of them was little George Hainsworth. He scored 22 shutouts in one 44-game season, more than the great Vezina had in his whole career. In Toronto, Conn Smythe introduced a rookie named Charlie Conacher. He had a shot that blistered like a blowtorch, and two hot line mates named Joe Primo and Busher Jackson. They call that threesome the Kid Line.
Primo gets the draw right off the bat from Boucher and moves over onto the left wing. He's skating down there. Jackson fails to follow up, and Conacher is moving over onto the right side.
Conacher scored 225 goals in his 12 pro seasons, and he won the scoring championship twice.
Well, it's conceded that you have the hardest shot of the National Hockey League. I think a lot of people would be very interested to know just how you hold your stick. How do you get them away so fast?
Well, I hold a stick that's about the same as anyone else, Foster, but I think I snapped away with my wrist a little quicker.
In the opening game of the 1936 playoffs, however, the players were more concerned about sleep than scores. Detroit and Montreal Maroons were still tied in the sixth overtime period of a game that seemingly had no end.
The Red Wings move up towards the Montreal line. Het Kilray takes the puck, shifts to the left. Alan Shields trying to head him off. Kilray loses control of the puck. It dribbles over towards Bruneau, who comes tearing in. Bruneau takes a whack at it. He scores!
It was 2:25 a.m. Hockey's longest game was over after 176 minutes and 30 seconds of play and hard work.
And Jackson and Davidson take over right near the blue line. Jackson clears over to Davidson. Davidson hops right back to Jackson. It's right in front for Sellamps. He lets go. He shoots. He scores. The Oilers had no chance on that one.
That was only one of 16 goals for Toronto's Joseph Sylvanus Apps that 1936-37 season. Good enough to make him Rookie of the Year, and good enough to launch a starry career. The next year, Boston's Eddie Shore was named Most Valuable Player in the NHL for the fourth time, and that team got a new line.
It's Dumart getting it over to Schmidt. Schmidt across to Bauer. Bauer cuts in on the left wing. He's into the corner. He's digging that puck out. Schmidt is right in front of the net. He passes to Dumart. Dumart shoots. He scores! Great three-way passing play.
Here's Schmidt. He's across the line, going in on goal. He scores!
With Schmidt at center, the Kraut line led the team to 4 league titles and 2 cups. In 16 seasons, the fiery Schmidt alone collected 229 goals. In 1938-39, Boston goaltender Frank Primsek got a new name, Mr. Zero. The reason? He played 230 minutes of hockey without allowing a goal and racked up 10 shutouts. The pros went off to war with the rest of America, but play continued back home as a boost to morale. 2 of the biggest boosters were brothers. Doug and Max Bentley.
Holmgren intercepts, clears to Max Bentley. He's right in close, he shoots, he scores!
It was that kind of punch which earned Doug Bentley the scoring title in 1943, and a third-place spot for brother Max. The next season marked the start of the Montreal dynasty. The punchline of Richard, Toe Blake, and Elmer Locke produced 82 goals.
Carr banged at it from the side that time, and Richard to Toe Blake. A pass back to Richard on the near side, up over the line. He cuts across the defense. The return pass to Locke. To Blake. He shoots, he scores. Now Bouchard from his own line with Blake up over the line. Blake cutting in from the side. He's right in front. He shoots. He scores. Toe Blake. Toe Blake.
With Bill Dernan in goal, the Canadians lost only 5 games. Typical of the action was Richard's 5-goal outburst against Toronto, March 23rd.
Moves in on the left side. He clears across to Toe Blake. Richard is carrying in fast on the right wing. He picks up the puck. He's right in close. He scores!
But the Rockets' greatest season lay ahead, culminating one night in 1944.
Crosses the blue line, clears out in front. Locke gets that puck. He passes over the right side. Richard sweeps in fast. He shoots. He scores!
Richard and his line mates placed 1, 2, 3 in scoring that season. The team won the league title. Locke was the most valuable player. Dernan won the Vezina Trophy. 5 Canadians were named to the All-Star team. The only hitch was that the Maple Leafs won the marbles in the playoffs. And in 1945, a slope-shouldered, raw-boned rookie with Detroit had a 7-goal season. But Gordie Howe almost quit the team because the brass had overlooked the promise of a Red Wing jacket.
No, I didn't almost quit when I didn't get my jacket. I was hurt to a degree because this was a very proud moment in my life when I could be walking around with that Red Wing crest on my chest. But what had happened there was Jack Adams sent me to Galt, Ontario, which was a junior A farm club at the time when we had sponsored clubs. And I went in there with the idea that they were going to give me X number of dollars for expenses and I would further my education. Well, the money took its a little bit of time coming, but which was fine and dandy until I got settled. But the jacket never did come. So the following year when I was sent to Omaha and turned pro, my complaints then were that I reminded him that I had been promised a jacket. So he looked at me and says, well, go down and get 3 or 4.
The misunderstanding was vaguely reminiscent of the year the Canadians almost traded away the great Rocket. Fortunately for hockey, Howe and Richard stayed where they started, and in 9 seasons, they held down the right wing slot on the All-Star team, producing one of the game's most compelling man-to-man rivalries.
Fox passing back to Ted Lindsay. Lindsay passes up from the backboard to Gordie Howe, who scores on Charlie Rayner of the New York Rangers.
We have 5 seconds left in the game. Howe at center over to Lindsay. 1 second. The game is over. Detroit wins the game 3-0 and the Stanley Cup.
The year was 1947, and when people talked about the production line, they didn't mean automobiles. The combination of Howe, Lindsay, and Abel led the Red Wings to 7 straight league titles in the late 40s and early 50s. As always, though, there were other stellar performances in other places.
The pad in the breakaways, and he shoots, and Dernan made a sensational save. Bill Dernan, the save of the night.
That bit of daring paid off. Moments later, Bill Barilko, an ill-starred defenseman, scored the winner, his last goal. 2 months later, Barilko died in a plane crash.
McNeil cleared off to the side. He passed right out to Barilko. Down the left wing. He just scored.
The next season was the year of hockey's fastest hat trick.
Across the New York line. Gardner drops the puck to Mosienko. He's going right in on goal. He shoots. He scores.
In 1952-53, the great Montreal-Toronto rivalry boiled over, producing one of hockey's worst fights. The penalty minutes from that one sounded like a basketball score. Montreal 106, Toronto 98. Oh yes, Toronto won the game 3-0. 1954 produced one of the most memorable Stanley Cup finals. In overtime of the 7th game, the series and the game were tied.
Leswick shot, deflects off Doug Harvey's thumb into the net, and the Detroit Red Wings win the Stanley Cup.
So irate were the Canadians that they stomped off the ice without shaking hands. Said Montreal coach Dick Irvin, "I refuse to be a hypocrite." Doug Harvey, of course, recovered from that humiliation. In 19 incredible seasons, he was an All-Star 11 times, and he won the Norris Trophy as best defenseman 7 times. Cosmopolitan Montreal faced rioting in her streets long before Newark or Detroit. And ironically, it happened on St. Patrick's Night, 1955. The central figure was explosive Maurice "Rocket" Richard, suspended by NHL President Clarence Campbell for punching a linesman.
To the type of conduct which cannot be tolerated by any player, star or otherwise. In the result, Richard will be suspended from all games, both league and playoff, for the balance of the current season.
What rankled Montreal fans was that Richard was lost to the team for the playoffs. In a town where hockey tickets are willed to favorite friends or relatives, the mood was ugly as Campbell took his seat in the Forum to watch the last home game of the season between league-leading Montreal and second-place Detroit.
And I noticed down there in the south end, just behind the Detroit goal, a fan coming down to get an autograph from Mr. Campbell. He has a program in his hand. Oh, he hit Mr. Campbell with the program. There's confusion in that area. Now there's a lot of smoke down there behind the goal. Apparently a smoke bomb.
We're at the corner of Fort and St. Catherine. That sound is the sound of breaking plate glass windows. That crowd tonight is in an ugly mood. They're moving east away from the Forum, down St. Catherine Street. City police are now forming behind them, and there's not a window left.
Outside, they threw rocks and bottles at police, tore down trolley lines, broke windows, and looted stores. A chagrined Richard went on the radio, attempting to calm his fans in French. He vowed also to lead the team to the Cup next year.
It hurts not to be in the game with the boys. However, I want to do what is good for the people of Montreal and my team. So that no further harm will be done, I would like to ask everyone to get behind the team and help the boys to win from Rangers and Detroit.
In 1956, the Canadians beat Detroit in the Cup final, just as Richard had promised. Now, the Bleu Blanc Rouge were a powerhouse. The potent power play could turn any game around. The team scored so many power play goals, in fact, that in 1957, the NHL changed its rule on penalties. From that time, a shorthanded team could return to full power after the first goal. 1958 was the year of injuries for Montreal. Winger Dickie Moore fractured his wrist, but he continued to play, wearing a cast for the last 5 weeks of the season and won the scoring title.
I went to Toe Blake and I said, I think it would be better to remove me from the line of the Richards because Henry was only 2 points away from me, and I didn't want to hamper his chances of winning this scoring championship. But Henry, being the fellow he is, said, "No way, Dickie." He says, "You're staying on this line."
The Rocket recovered from a severed Achilles tendon and scored 10 goals in 11 playoff games, and Montreal won the Cup. In the next 2 seasons, it was more of the same, as the club that Frank Selke built and Toe Blake coached won an unprecedented 5 Stanley Cups in a row.
Moore takes the pass. There's the shot. Bauer kicks it out. The game is over. Montreal wins the Stanley Cup for the 4th consecutive season. Montreal 4, Toronto nothing, and the Montreal Canadiens win the Stanley Cup for the 5th consecutive year.
Goaltender Jacques Plante made modern hockey history that season.
And now here come the teams back onto the ice. The Montreal Canadiens fighting from the far side, and here's Jacques Plante, and he's wearing a mask.
In 1917, the NHL stopped fining goaltenders $2 each time they dropped to the ice to make a save. And Plante's use of the mask was to revolutionize the art of stopping hockey pucks in the same manner. But the hockey revolution was only beginning. There were records to be broken on and off the ice. At the start of the revolutionary 60s, Maurice Richard retired, but other stars took his place.
Along the boards, picked up by Fleming. Fleming passes the quick right foot to Bobby Howell. Bobby Howell shoots. Oh, he scores!
Rush ball goes in at the backboards. Fights for it. Has it. Trying to center it now as Boston is at full strength. Now to Orr. Orr cuts right in. Looks. Oh! Fakes. Shoots. Scores!
The NHL continued to grow too. Teams were established in 8 new cities by 1970, and records were tied only to be broken.
Bill Trombley back to the point to Jeffrey-on. Jeffrey-on closing in. He shoots. He scores. Boom, boom. Jeffrey-on gets the 50th goal of the season for him.
The date was March 16th, 1961. But in Chicago, Jeffrey-on's effort took second place to the fate of the high-flying Blackhawks.
The rebound to Nikita at the side of the net. He slides it back to the point to Palat. Here's the screen shot. A scramble in front of the net. It goes to Balfour. He shoots. He scores!
In their delirium, most fans overlooked the infamous Curse of Muldoon. 34 years earlier, that was a hex placed on the Hawks in 1927 by an irate coach who was fired, and before packing his bags, Pete Muldoon swore that the Hawks would never win the cup. The relative longevity of the Muldoon curse is probably one reason why some players are so superstitious. But there was nothing at all mysterious about Bobby Hull in 1962. With his bullet-like shot, clocked at over 100 miles per hour, Hull tied the Richard Jeffrey-on goal record.
Picked up by Fleming. Fleming passes a quick right foot to Bobby Hull. Bobby Hull shoots. Oh, he scores!
Appropriately, the NHL Hall of Fame opened the same year.
And I declare officially open this Hockey Hall of Fame.
The next season, Red Kelly helped the Leafs to the Stanley Cup. In 20 NHL seasons with Detroit and Toronto, the Redhead made the All-Star team 8 times and scored 823 points. Hockey has always had its bad boys, one of whom was Howie Young. In 1963, he claimed the dubious distinction as the most penalized player in league history. His 273 minutes in the cooler, in fact, meant that Young sat out the equivalent of 4.5 games, a record that has since been broken by Chicago's Keith Magnuson. One of Young's older teammates was also making history.
That assist by Gordie Howe, the 1,092nd point of his career, and he eclipses the previous record held by Rocket Richard.
McNeil coming up over the line. A pass to Howe. A shot. Scores! Howe picks the lower corner, and there it is. McNeil from Howe, and Howe has broken the record.
It came about in a kind of a funny manner. I put it in the short side, I believe, and going in behind the net, I think I tried to react like a kid, which I was at that time, and I threw my hands and jumped in the air, and I took the biggest flop I ever did.
A month later, again with Montreal as the opposition, Howe became the league's all-time goal-getter.
Bergman over to McKinney. McKinney sidesteps the check. Feeds it over to Howe right in front of the goal. He shoots. He scores for Gordie Howe, the 600th regular season.
The name Howe became synonymous with records. In a quarter century with Detroit, the ambidextrous right winger played in 22 All-Star games. He was the scoring champ and most valuable player 6 times. Even Bobby Hull is in awe.
Well, from when I first came up in the league back in 57, 58, Gordie Howe was the tremendous leader of, I think, the entire league. Not only of the Detroit Red Wings, he was the marked individual. He was Mr. Hockey and did everything so well. I claim myself, after being around for a few years, that only because of how that the Detroit Red Wings were even in the playoffs. He's just a terrific individual, along with a great hockey player. Did everything right, did everything well, and I don't think I've ever seen him when he's had a poor game. He could score goals, and he was a terrific playmaker and a great checker. Not too many goals were scored while he was out on the ice.
Back in 1964, there was another historic moment.
Tkachuk kicks it out into the corner. Beliveau quickly following into the goal crease. Tkachuk clears that away, and the game is over. Terry Tkachuk has shut out the Canadians. Final score 2-0 for Tkachuk, his 95th career shutout.
It was the same year that the Blackhawks learned just how much they needed Bobby Hull. He scored 8 goals in 7 games as Chicago beat Detroit in the semifinals. But in the showdown against Montreal, Hull scored only 2 goals, and the Hawks lost the bundle.
In order for a club to win games, it automatically becomes a team effort. Sure, there can be 1 or 2 individuals that might star or might lead a club and do a lot of the offensive work. It still takes as in hockey, 18 individuals. They all have a job to do, both defensively and offensively. And I believe that if you'll check the records of any club that ever wins any championship, it's not necessarily the number of points that they've scored. It's the tremendous defensive record that they have that has won this championship. I believe that in order to have a terrific goals against record and win your goaltenders the Vezina Trophy, it takes all 18 individuals doing his job on every night in order to achieve this.
Ignoring his own advice, Hull became a one-man roadshow in the 1965-66 season and had 44 goals in the first 45 games. Then on March 12th, the Golden Jet prompted a 7-minute ovation in New York's Madison Square Garden.
Hodge goes to the corner, passes it in front of Hay. He fakes the shot, gets it back to Bobby Hull. There's a tremendous shot by Hull. He scores, and Bobby Hull's 54th goal.
Hull became the darling of hockey fans and one of hockey's first stars to make as much money off the ice as on.
Hodward's underway at the Minnesota line. Drops it for Roberto. Roberto to Beliveau. Here it is. Beliveau moving in. Scores! 500! What a play!
I see great opportunity for you in hockey. And as I'm leaving, I hope that I have contributed to make this foundation and strengthen this foundation for those who are going to follow.
Plays like that earned LeGrosjean the Conn Smythe Trophy as best playoff performer in 1966 and countless other honors in his 20 seasons.
Now, it is also a great pleasure for me to present to you for the first time the new Conn Smythe Trophy as the outstanding player in the playoffs. Congratulations. To make the presentation to the winning team, Montreal Canadiens, for the 13th time. And I ask the captain, John Beliveau, to accept it. Congratulations, John.
By the time he retired in 1971, Beliveau had been an All-Star 10 times and had played on 10 Stanley Cup winners. Adequate repayment to the Canadiens organization, which had bought an entire team just to acquire Beliveau in the first place. In the 1966-67 season, the game of hockey took off. The contract with CBS was worth a cool $3.5 million and millions of new fans throughout the U.S. What the fans saw was no letdown.
Picked up by Bobby Orr. Bobby Orr steps in over the blue line. He's in the clear. Cut in and go. Oh, he shoots. He scores! Bobby Orr has picked up his first NHL goal. Kelly gets the draw, gets it back to Fulford. Fulford shoots it out on the right wing to Armstrong. Armstrong over the blue line. That's to the right. He shoots again. Yes. Oh, he scores!
Dave Keon breaks it over the Chicago blue line. He's cutting in the left wing. He shoots. Oh, and Tony Esposito lunges out and grabs that puck and holds it for a face-off. A great save by Tony Esposito.
Marshall's got it back to the right point to Al Hamilton. Into Goyette. Goyette trying to look for Marshall. Oh, backhand drive. Thoreau's right there. He shoots. He scores. Goal for Hull.
With Makita wielding a hot stick and Iron Man Glenn Hall between the pipes and Hull shooting 52 goals, the Hawks won their first league championship, but not the cup. That went to Punch Imlach's Maple Leafs. 1967 was the year of the great expansion to Los Angeles, Minnesota, Oakland, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis. The new teams won less than half their games and traded away many young prospects for weathered veterans. But for league president Clarence Campbell, the future was bright.
The majority of the game played within its own division. They will play each other 10 times, 5 at home and 5 away. In addition to that, they will play 4 games against each of the new division teams, 2 at home and 2 away. At the conclusion of the season, each division will participate in the playoffs, and the winners of the 2 divisions will play off in the Stanley Cup final.
Along with expansion came the Mods, their long hair and lips flying, and one of them was Boston's Derek Sanderson.
Derek, you and the Bruins featured shorthanded goals this year and set a new record in that department, and it's been one of your specialties. What are you conscious of when you're killing a penalty?
The basic thing in killing penalties is just to make sure that you can pick up your winger. If you go forecheck them and harass them before they can get organized in their own end, you can practically kill the penalty off itself. But the dangerous part is picking up the winger, coming back, and make sure that the man in the slot is covered. He's got to watch both point man and the centerman. The wingers aren't really that dangerous unless the point man gets the puck, and then they can start tipping shots. Basically, I think it's a matter of working, knowing who you're playing with, and of course killing penalties with Orr and Dallas Smith, as we do most of the time, is, it really helps us out quite a bit.
Sanderson was part of the entire sports revolution of the late 60s. No longer content just to eat Wheaties and do push-ups, young players started looking for long-term security and jollies away from the stadium. In 1968, Bobby Hull shattered the 50-goal plateau for the 4th time.
Over to Gordie Howe. He knocked it up to the blue line, intercepted there by Gil Murat. Murat over to Stapleton. Back to Bobby Hull, right in front of the net. Hull shoots. He scores!
Unfortunately for Hull, that was only good enough for a second-place spot in the scoring race behind Boston's gangling center, Phil Esposito. Espo scored an amazing 126 points, but the record-breaking was not confined to the East Division, to the delight of hockey fans in St. Louis.
Van Hip lofts it to Berenson. Berenson has a break. One man back. Here he comes. A shot. He scores! Fred Berenson has tied the record. It's 6 goals in one game.
That effort tied a mark set 25 years earlier by Detroit's Sid Howe. With Berenson setting the pace, the Blues won their divisional title. But Montreal overcame St. Louis in the playoffs, the second straight cup victory for Toe Blake. By 1969, Boston fans were restless. It had been 20 years since the team had won the cup. A kid named Orr gave them something to cheer about.
Sanderson's drive again is wide. Kept in by Orr. Orr feeds Sanderson behind the net. Back to Orr. He scores! West Stansfield.
Oh, beautiful, Don. Just great. No kidding. Everybody feels fantastic.
There, big guy. Eddie Westfall.
I tell you, it's been a long, long time coming for me, and I don't know what else to say.
Hey, Eddie Johnston.
Terrific. Oh, this is great, too, from great to my life. Great bunch of guys, and not a greater guy could have scored a goal.
Appropriately, as Boston was discovering, Bobby's last name means gold in French. But it was silver that Orr collected in 1970. 4 NHL trophies, the Ross for scoring, the Norris for best defenseman, the Hart for most valuable player, and the Smythe for playoff prowess. In the 1970-71 season, hockey in Boston was like watching a 4-ring circus. Orr, Esposito, John Busick, and Ken Hodge were the star attractions.
Bruins set on the power play as Esposito winds up behind the net, starting out now. Back to Orr. Orr, flying, turns the net. He comes hard, center ice. Coming up over the Toronto line. Over on the left side. Wheels around inside the zone. Now still holds it. Stops. Holds it. Now left to Stanfield. Now to Esposito in front. Scores! Phil Esposito has broken the record. Power play goal held by Bobby Hull as he gets his 23rd. And Phil Esposito makes it 1-0 on his 72nd goal of the season with that beautiful, quick wrist shot.
Orr, Espo, Busick, and Hodge placed 1, 2, 3, and 4 in scoring, all with more than 100 points. Even shorthanded, the Bruins were devastating. In fact, they set a record for goals scored with a man in the penalty box.
Philadelphia with a man advantage. The Bruins now break out of their zone. Don Marcotte, Dallas Smith, and Bobby Orr moving to center ice. Dallas Smith over the line of Marcotte on the left side. He shoots. He scores! Marcotte and the Bruins have set a new National Hockey League record for shorthanded goals as they now have 15, breaking the old mark set by Chicago.
In all, the Bruins of 1970-71 broke more records than any team in league history. And Phil Esposito set the pace.
Beer stops it behind the net for Guy Lapointe. Lapointe trying to move it out, stopped by Stanfield. Well up from the left point, holding, looking. Now back to Orr at the right point. He fires. Now save, rebound. Esposito! Number 75 for Phil Esposito to make it 4-1 for the Boston Bruins as he drove home the rebound of a Bobby Orr shot. And Esposito has scored 75 goals
Phil also had a record 152 points. What could Esposito do for an encore?
I won't really feel the effects of it until I think after I quit, and then, you know, after you quit hockey and or after you quit any athletics for that matter, you start realizing the things that you have done because you're looking back. And when your grandchildren come up to you and say, you know, did you really play hockey, Gramps? You know, I'm going to tell them, yeah, and I've got a few things I'd like to show them, but I don't think I'll ever really feel the great effect of what I, you know, have achieved, which I'm quite proud of, by the way, until I retire from the game.
But all the records didn't mean a thing to the Bruins in the 1971 playoffs, mainly because of the work of Montreal's rookie goaltender, Ken Dryden.
I saw them the last two games. It's the first times I've seen them all year except for an exhibition game. I think they're a very good hockey team, but I also think that if we do settle down and play sort of controlled hockey and smart hockey, I think it'll be a very interesting series.
Busick going, centers it, Esposito shot, Dryden saves! Oh, what a chance Esposito had, alone in front, centering pass from Busick, and Dryden saves. Just superb goaltending. Hodge gets it, out in front, Stanfield shoots, Dryden saves, shot it right at him, broken stick, tried not to grab it in the air, and the Bruins had their chances.
Sparked by such efforts and the play of hockey's big M, Frank Mahovlich, Montreal denied the Bruins the logical conclusion to their incredible season.
Makita gets it over to Pitmark. He's going in, and he's checked by Cournoyer. Cournoyer clears it to center. 1 second left. The game is over.
The Richard Dryden Act was a reminder to hockey fans throughout the world that veterans can be counted on and that new faces can't be counted out.
Dave Keon breaks it over the Chicago blue line. He's cutting in the left wing. He shoots. Oh, and Tony Esposito lunges out and grabs that puck and holds it for a faceoff. A great save by Tony Esposito.
Marshall's got it back to the right point to Al Hamilton. Into Goyette. Goyette trying to look for Marshall. Oh, backhand drive. Thoreau's right there. He shoots. He scores. Oh, Thoreau.
Such is the essence of professional hockey. Yesterday's GOAT is today's hero. The rookie of today, tomorrow's star. By the start of the 70s, it was this mix of old and new which promised to launch the NHL into its most prosperous and exciting decade. 2 new teams were added in Vancouver and Buffalo. There was even talk of competition with European clubs. And on small rinks, away from the crowds, there were the sounds familiar to a bygone era.
No, I want to be Fabiola. I want to be Fabiola. I ain't gonna be Derek Sanderson. Fabiola, I want to be Fabiola.